What if your real battle isn't your job, your income, or your past, but the way you think about them? Most men try to fix their lives by changing what's outside. New job, new goals, new distractions. But the same problems return, because they never train the one thing that shapes everything, their mind. Stoic philosophy doesn't offer comfort. It offers clarity. It won't tell you to run from struggle. It will teach you how to walk through it with control, with discipline, with reason. You don't need more motivation. You need mental resilience. You need to rewire the way you respond to pressure. That's what this video is about. We'll walk through 8 powerful shifts that will help you train your thoughts daily, develop a Stoic mindset transformation, and rebuild your inner script. Not with hype, but with grounded strength. You'll learn how to clean up your mental diet, overcome negativity through logic, and create a fortress of reason from simple habits. If you've ever felt like your mind spins out before life even hits hard, you're not alone. But you're not stuck either. It's time to stop letting emotions control the narrative. Time to choose how you think and who you become. Educate your mind, and you can overcome anything. Stick with this video. Every second will train your mind. Every lesson will point you inward. And what you find there might just set you free. Like the video, subscribe for more daily Stoic practices to build an unshakable life. 1. End the escape with conscious thinking. You can change cities, change routines, even change the people around you. But if your thoughts remain reactive, the outcome stays the same. The man who escapes his problems without addressing his mindset isn't running toward freedom. He's just circling the same battlefield, disguised in a different location. Imagine a man pacing in a burning room. He opens windows, paints the walls, and rearranges furniture. But the fire is in his head, not outside. That's what most people do with stress. They shift the scenery, hoping their anxiety will vanish with it. It won't, because the source isn't out there. It's internal, untrained, unexamined. We've been conditioned to think that action always means progress, but motion without awareness is just exhaustion. Stoicism cuts through that illusion. It teaches you to pause, to observe your automatic reactions, and to ask, why do I respond this way, and is it necessary? The untrained mind panics at discomfort. It wants to avoid the hard conversation, numb the pressure, and scroll past the unease. But Stoics knew, discomfort is data. It reveals where you're unprepared. It shows you the edges of your mental discipline. And only when you face it can you reshape it. What Epictetus taught wasn't just calm in chaos, it was control through clarity. He didn't tell men to fight their emotions. He trained them to question their assumptions. Man is not disturbed by events, but by his view of them. That's not poetry. That's tactical wisdom. If you believe every emotion is truth, every conflict feels personal, and every setback feels fatal. But you're not obligated to believe your first reaction. That's where education begins. Not in knowing more, but in interrupting less. To educate the mind is to teach it how not to be pulled by the first wave. It means catching the story your brain creates in the moment of stress and choosing not to trust it blindly. Start simple. Next time someone offends you, don't defend yourself. Don't explain. Don't react. Just ask silently, what am I about to assume? That space between the event and your reaction is the beginning of freedom. That's the moment Stoicism lives in, not in theory, but in practice. That space is where you stop being controlled and start taking control. Educating your mind doesn't require retreats or bookshelves. It requires awareness at the point of tension. It's when you want to quit, and instead of moving cities, you move inward. You study the thought. You question its logic. You look it in the eye and say, you're not in charge. I am. This is not self-help fluff. This is an internal command. Emotional detachment isn't coldness. It's clarity. When you stop chasing the false relief of escape, you start building the real strength of endurance. That's what Stoicism trains for. Not to feel less, but to react less. To pause, to reframe, to respond with the discipline of thought, not the disorder of impulse. Many men waste years trying to control the world and never spend a single day trying to understand their reactions to it. That's backwards. Life won't stop throwing punches, but your reaction is a muscle. You either strengthen it or you surrender to whatever hits you. You want peace? Stop chasing peace. Start mastering perception. You want freedom? Stop running. Start observing. The moment you stop escaping, you begin educating, and that's the first step toward overcoming anything. 2. Train the gatekeeper of your mind. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every emotion deserves a seat at the table. Yet most men live as if everything that enters their heads is true, as if every fear must be obeyed, every worry must be entertained. That's not awareness. That's mental slavery. Picture your mind as a home with no doors. Everything walks in: news, insults, doubts, distractions, and it stays. Thoughts pile up in corners. Old failures haunt the hallway. Anger sleeps on your couch. If you never trained the gatekeeper, don't be surprised when chaos becomes the atmosphere you live in. Stoicism teaches that control begins not with the world, but with what enters your attention. What you allow into your mind will eventually shape your emotions, your decisions, and your identity. That's why Marcus Aurelius warned, do not just accept what your mind tells you. Examine it, challenge it. That's what the Stoics call the discipline of assent, deciding which thoughts are permitted and which are dismissed. But that takes practice. Most men don't question their thoughts because they've never been taught to. They confuse movement with clarity. They assume strong feelings equal true danger. But emotion isn't a verdict. It's only an alert. You still get to decide what it means. This is where real education begins. You don't need a PhD to master your thoughts. You need the habit of interrogation. Each time a fear rises, each time a criticism hits, you ask, is this true? Is this useful? Does this deserve my energy? Most of the time the answer is no. But you won't know unless you pause and check. Imagine standing at the gates of your mind like a soldier. Your job isn't to feel everything. Your job is to decide what gets in. You guard the door. You decide the tone. You protect the mental space where discipline grows and disorder is removed. This is not cold detachment. It's structured thinking. It's emotional discipline the Stoic way. And the cost of not doing this? You become a man pulled in 10 directions. You wake up angry for no reason. You snap at people who don't deserve it. You feel mentally foggy, unable to focus, because your mind has been overrun by every unfiltered message you allowed to enter. Every day, the world sends noise into your life. Ads are trying to shape your self-worth. Headlines are designed to provoke fear. People are projecting their anxiety onto you. If you're not actively filtering, you're unconsciously absorbing. You don't even realize you're being trained, just not by you. So train the gatekeeper. Start with 5 minutes each morning. Sit quietly. Write down the dominant thoughts that arise. Question each one like an investigator. Is it built on logic or just leftover emotion from yesterday? Can you prove it? Is it pushing you forward or pulling you down? Then throughout the day, build in checkpoints. When your mood shifts, don't just ride the emotion. Pause. Ask, what thought just entered and why am I giving it power? That question alone can interrupt the automatic spiral and return you to clarity. You're not powerless, you've just been passive. The mind, when left unchecked, will believe anything. But when trained, it becomes a fortress. Not rigid, but resilient. Not numb, but alert. Stoics weren't born with perfect minds. They just refused to let their thoughts rule them. They stood at the door. They questioned everything, and in doing so, they created space to think clearly, to lead themselves, and to respond with precision. When you train the gatekeeper of your mind, you take back control from the noise. You don't stop the world from talking, but you stop letting it think for you. That's not theory. That's power. And it's built one filtered thought at a time. 3. Turn suffering into understanding. Pain will visit every life. That's not a threat, it's a certainty. The question is never if suffering will arrive. It's whether you will use it or be used by it. Most men don't know what to do with pain. They suppress it, deny it, or drown it. But pain, left unprocessed, doesn't disappear. It stores itself in your reactions, your beliefs, and your habits. It builds silent walls around your potential. Think of pain like fire. In the hands of a craftsman, fire purifies. It strengthens steel, it hardens the edge. But in the hands of the careless, fire destroys. It consumes what was meant to be transformed. Your mind works the same way. An educated mind doesn't fear pain, it uses it. It asks, what is this here to reveal? Stoic philosophy doesn't teach you to run from hardship. It trains you to face it head-on with reason as your weapon and discipline as your armor. We've been conditioned to believe that healing means feeling better. But sometimes healing means seeing clearer. Pain exposes lies you've lived with for years. The lie that your worth depends on others, the lie that your past defines you, the lie that you're powerless. But you only see those lies if you're willing to stay present with the discomfort. Not escape it, not dramatize it, just face it. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, war, and loss while leading the Roman Empire. Yet his reflections were not bitter. He wrote with clarity, not complaint. If you are distressed by anything external, he said, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. That's the shift. Not everything painful is harmful, and not everything that feels good is good for you. The Stoic doesn't measure life by how it feels, but by what it forms. When you avoid pain, you avoid growth. But when you meet it with awareness, it becomes raw material for strength. You begin to interpret rather than react. That's mental resilience. That's how you stop suffering from controlling your narrative. It doesn't vanish, but it loses its grip because you've stopped running from it and started learning from it. Try this. When something painful happens, a rejection, a setback, a hard truth, write it down without the story. Strip the emotion. Write just the facts. Then ask, what belief is this triggering? That one question opens a door. It moves you from being a victim of emotion to being a student of experience. And that shift changes everything. An untrained mind will replay the hurt over and over, rehearsing weakness until it becomes identity. But a disciplined mind rewires the story. It turns pain into understanding, and understanding into forward motion. This is not positivity. It's not denial. It's control. Not of the world, but of yourself. You can't choose every event in life, but you can choose how deeply you let it scar you or shape you. Educating your mind doesn't mean escaping pain. It means extracting wisdom from it before it turns into poison. And that wisdom builds emotional self-mastery. It turns wounds into weapons, struggles into insight, and it makes you dangerous to anything that once broke you. 4. Rewrite the inner script with reason. A man isn't ruined by what happens around him. He's ruined by what he keeps repeating inside. Some men are physically free but mentally trapped, living in scripts they never wrote. Scripts planted by failure, shame, or someone else's voice. I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. I'll never be like them. These aren't harmless thoughts. They're internal orders, and your mind follows them. Imagine carrying a voice recorder that plays your worst self-judgments on loop. Now imagine listening to it every morning before getting out of bed. That's what an untrained mind does. It doesn't filter. It doesn't question. It obeys whatever narrative has been left running the longest. But Stoics don't live by unconscious scripts. They confront their inner voice, question its authority, and rewrite it with reason. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet battled anxiety, exhaustion, and doubt. He didn't suppress it. He wrote to it. He faced the voices that whispered weakness and responded with truth. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he wrote. That's not philosophy. That's a command, and most men need to hear it. You can't overcome anything if the voice in your head is working against you. Emotional self-sabotage doesn't show up loudly. It shows up in passive thoughts you don't challenge. That's why education begins with awareness, not of what's happening outside, but of what's being whispered inside. Take the phrase you say to yourself most when you fail. Write it down. Read it like you're reading a script written by someone else, because often that's exactly what it is. A careless parent, a bitter teacher, a past mistake, a distorted belief. Then challenge it. Is this true? Is it logical? Would I let a stranger speak this way to someone I love? If the answer is no, then you have no business letting it run your mind. You can't fight what you haven't named. You can't master what you haven't faced. That's why Stoicism doesn't start with motivation. It starts with truth. The truth is that the man you are today is shaped less by what happened and more by what you told yourself about what happened. That story can be edited, but only if you take the pen. This isn't a game of affirmations or forced positivity. It's about crafting an internal dialogue that aligns with logic, not emotion. It's about teaching your mind to be fair, not kind, not cruel, just accurate. You're not rewriting the script to feel better. You're rewriting it to see clearly. Try this. Every night, before sleep, write one sentence you believed about yourself that day. Not what you said out loud, what you actually believed. Then rewrite that sentence from a Stoic lens. Make it exact. Make it self-respecting. Make it grounded in discipline, not fantasy. Do that for 30 days. Watch how your confidence stops depending on circumstances and starts building from clarity. A man who trains his body but not his thinking is strong for a moment and loses in a lifetime. But a man who rewrites the internal script with logic, who replaces noise with reason, that man becomes unshakable. He stops negotiating with old narratives. He stops asking for permission to change. He becomes the author of his direction, not the echo of his past. What you think is who you become. So before you try to fix your life, fix your script, rebuild it, line by line, with reason as your tool and truth as your ink. 5. Clean up your mental diet. A man who trains his body but feeds his mind garbage will never have peace. He might lift heavy, but inside he's hollow, because what you feed your thoughts becomes what you feel, and eventually what you believe. The mind is not a blank canvas, it's a garden. What you allow in, day after day, takes root. And most men, without knowing it, are cultivating weeds. Imagine drinking muddy water every morning, then wondering why you feel sick. Now think of the media, conversations, and habits you consume without question. Headlines are designed to trigger anxiety, arguments on social media that steal your focus, noise that adds nothing but subtracts from your clarity. We've normalized a chaotic inner world by calling it staying informed. But distraction is not education. Emotional reactivity is not a strength. Information is only power if it's filtered with wisdom. The Stoics were ruthless about their mental environment. Marcus Aurelius didn't just write to reflect, he wrote to clean. His journal wasn't a diary, it was a shield. He examined his thoughts, like a soldier checking his armor for cracks. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, he wrote. That's not a metaphor, that's the law. You become what you mentally rehearse, and most men rehearse fear, shame, comparison, or outrage, because that's what they've been silently consuming. You want to feel grounded? Stop feeding your nervous system junk. Start protecting your input with the same discipline you guard your wallet. Ask yourself, does this sharpen my mind or scatter it? Does this build inner clarity or erode it? If it doesn't strengthen the fortress, it doesn't belong inside the gate. Start with what you see first in the morning. Is it your phone? The news? Somebody else's crisis disguised as a post? Change it. Replace it with silence, or with one strong sentence from a philosopher who didn't waste his morning scrolling. Feed your thoughts like you'd feed a warrior about to go to battle. Deliberately, not impulsively. Then throughout the day, track your triggers. What drains you? What agitates you without bringing truth? What voices are you letting into your mind that would never survive under scrutiny? Audit your daily input like your sanity depends on it, because it does. The modern world profits from your distraction, but you lose something deeper. Your mental focus, your emotional balance, your ability to think clearly under pressure. When you clean up your mental diet, you don't become ignorant, you become dangerous. You become the man who doesn't overreact, who doesn't crumble in chaos, who doesn't absorb every opinion as truth. You develop emotional resilience not because you were born with it, but because you stopped feeding your anxiety and started training your reason. Stoicism is not about isolation, it's about filtration. The mind was made for clarity, but clarity requires effort, and it begins with what you allow in. Don't confuse stimulation with nourishment. Most of what looks entertaining is mental noise. Most of what's popular is spiritually cheap. And what enters your mind repeatedly will eventually become the filter you see the world through. So clean the lens, tighten the gate, and before you go searching for peace, ask yourself, what have I been feeding my mind today, and does it deserve the power to shape who I become? Clean minds don't happen by accident. They're built with discipline, one filter at a time. 6. Build a fortress of reason with small habits. Strength is not something you summon when life gets hard. It's something you build when life feels quiet. Most men wait for chaos to strike before they think about self-control. By then, it's too late. The damage has started, and their mind scrambles to catch up. But a Stoic doesn't react in panic. He prepares with structure. His clarity isn't improvised, it's trained. Think of the mind like a fortress. You can't build walls in the middle of a storm. You build them when the skies are clear, one brick at a time, one habit at a time. Not dramatic, not loud, just consistent. The problem is, most people chase breakthroughs but ignore discipline. They want transformation, but they reject repetition. And that's why they stay stuck. Because transformation doesn't come from feelings, it comes from structure. Stoic philosophy isn't a theory, it's a daily practice. It's how you wake up, what you tell yourself, how you respond to an interruption. It's in the way you manage the first thought that hits you in the morning, whether you let it spiral or you meet it with logic. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to sound wise. He wrote because wisdom fades fast without daily reminders. Zeno said, "Well-being is realized by small steps, but it is no small thing." That's not poetic. That's a blueprint. You can't build inner stability without routine. And yet most men live without one. They wake up reactive. Their mind are unguarded, their emotions unfiltered. Then they wonder why they feel overwhelmed by noon. Not because life is overwhelming, but because they never created a foundation to carry the weight. If you want to educate your mind to overcome anything, begin with repetition. Pick one practice that disciplines your thoughts and repeat it daily. It doesn't need to look impressive, it needs to be intentional. A 5-minute morning reset where you write down the top emotion in your body and ask yourself, is it rooted in fear or truth? A moment before every meeting where you silently ask, what am I trying to control that doesn't belong to me? These are not motivational tricks. They are defensive drills, like a soldier cleaning his weapon daily whether he sees the enemy or not. Discipline is not an emergency response. It's preparation for what hasn't happened yet. You build mental stability before life shakes it. The world will test you with delay, rejection, disrespect, and uncertainty. But if your inner framework is strong, the test becomes training. You don't collapse under pressure. You grow through it, because your habits gave your mind something firm to stand on. This is how Stoics become unshakable. Not because they're immune to chaos, but because they've built a place inside that chaos can't enter. They know that willpower will fail, but the structure will hold. That is when emotions flare, habits stay quiet, and do their job. So don't wait for clarity to arrive. Create it, build it, repeat it. One habit, one moment, one thought at a time. And over time, the fortress forms. Not from big declarations, but from small decisions, made consistently and protected fiercely. You don't need a new mindset overnight. You need to lay one brick today, then show up tomorrow, and do it again. 7. Lead your mind before it leads you. A man doesn't fall apart all at once. He drifts, one unchallenged thought at a time. By the time life hits hard, he's already surrendered, not a problem, to a pattern of letting his mind drive while he sits in the back seat. Stoics never did that. They believed the untrained mind is the first enemy, not the external world. And if you don't lead it, it will lead you somewhere you never meant to go. Imagine handing your car keys to a teenager who's never been taught how to drive, then blaming the crash on the road. That's how most men treat their minds. They let impulse take the wheel. They react before they think. They make decisions not from clarity, but from chaos. The Stoic approach is different. It says, lead first, feel second. Control the input before the storm begins. Because once emotion floods the system, logic drowns fast. Leading your mind doesn't mean forcing positivity. It means building direction before distraction sets in. Every day before the world starts talking, you decide your mental position. You choose your priorities, define what deserves energy, and establish what doesn't. That's not about productivity. It's about self-preservation. A man who doesn't choose his mindset gets hijacked by someone else's. Marcus Aurelius, leading Rome during wars and plagues, still began his mornings in silence, writing out his thoughts, not because he had time, but because he couldn't afford not to. He didn't trust the mind's first reaction. Neither should you. The first reaction is often fear, ego, or memory. But the trained mind pauses, repositions, and responds from reason. It doesn't follow noise. It creates a signal. You want calm under pressure? You build it at the start of the day, not in the middle of a disaster. Sit for 5 minutes every morning and ask, what would I think if I weren't afraid today? What thought is trying to lead me, and should I follow it? That shift alone builds mental distance, and distance is power. It gives you space to respond instead of react. Most men collapse mentally not because the world broke them, but because they never built a compass inside. The enemy isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers just enough to change your direction. It tells you you're behind, that you're not enough, that you need to rush, compare, and explain. And if you're not leading the thought, it takes over. That's why Stoic training isn't a luxury, it's a requirement. Leading your mind is not about mastering the world, it's about not being mastered by your inner storms. Try this. At the point of tension, in a meeting, an argument, a setback, say nothing for 5 seconds. Let the first thought pass like a wave. Then ask, what would the version of me I respect say or do right now? Lead with that. Speak from that. Act from that. That's control. That's inner leadership. Don't wait until life breaks down to start building. If you build now, you don't just survive what's next, you lead through it. Because your mind, once trained, becomes more than a defense. It becomes a weapon. One that doesn't fire in anger but cuts through confusion with clarity. One that doesn't wait to feel good before doing right. One that doesn't follow every thought because it already knows where it's going. 8. When the mind aligns, everything begins to shift. A man can spend years changing jobs, partners, routines, and still feel stuck. Not because nothing around him is working, but because everything inside him is misaligned. The most common mistake is thinking life changes when circumstances do. But Stoic philosophy flips that on its head. Life changes when perception does, because perception, not reality, decides whether you fight, flee, freeze, or rise. Picture a camera lens that's slightly off. Every photo is blurry, no matter how beautiful the view. You don't need a new scene. You need a sharper lens. That's how most people move through life, trying to fix what they see, instead of fixing how they see. And when your mind is misaligned, even peace feels unfamiliar, success feels undeserved, and setbacks feel permanent. The Stoics trained themselves not to rely on fortune, not because they feared failure, but because they refused to be ruled by chance. Marcus Aurelius didn't pray for better conditions. He trained for better perception. The impediment to action advances action, he wrote. What stands in the way becomes the way. That only makes sense if the mind is clear. That only works when inner vision is calibrated. Because to a reactive man, obstacles feel like personal attacks. But to a disciplined mind, they feel like invitations to rise. You align the mind not with fantasy, but with facts. Not with emotion, but with logic. Most men don't feel calm because they never question the assumptions they operate on. They assume hardship means failure, silence means rejection, delays mean denial. But those are stories, not truths. Alignment means testing the story before living by it. And the man who trains his mind to ask, is this real, or just my lens, begins to break cycles that have ruled him for decades. Try this. When stress hits, pause and locate the judgment behind the feeling. Not the feeling itself, the idea that caused it. Then ask, if I remove that thought, would I still suffer? If the answer is no, the problem isn't the world, it's the meaning you gave it. This is not detachment, it's mastery. It's how you stop overreacting and start reclaiming mental clarity. A man whose mind is aligned doesn't flinch at silence, doesn't collapse at inconvenience, and doesn't lose himself when people disappoint him. Because his compass doesn't swing with the noise. It stays fixed to reason. That's how you build unshakable self-control. Not by controlling everything, but by aligning with what's true regardless of what changes. The modern world will keep pulling you in every direction. Fear here, outrage there, pressure around every corner. If your mind isn't set, it will be hijacked. But when the inner world is steady, the outer world loses its power. Alignment isn't about being perfect, it's about being positioned. And when you're positioned in truth, everything around you begins to shift. Not because it changed, but because you stopped distorting it through untrained thinking. You won't need to control everything if you've trained yourself to interpret everything correctly. That's Stoicism in practice. It's not a shield from hardship, it's a way to face it with a level head and a steady hand. And when your perception becomes your tool, not your trap, you stop chasing peace and start embodying it. One thought at a time. One clear decision at a time. Until clarity becomes your default and the chaos outside no longer decides the man inside. A strong mind isn't given, it's trained. And every thought you shape, every reaction you pause before giving, every silent decision to stay grounded when others lose control, that's part of the training. What the Stoics knew, and what we must remember, is that life is never about what happens to us. It's about how we interpret it, how we frame it, and how we respond with clarity, not chaos. You don't overcome everything by force. You overcome it by perception. That's the quiet power Stoicism offers. A calm mind, a sharp lens, a disciplined response. It teaches us that we don't need to react to everything. We don't need to chase validation or run from discomfort. We only need to train the mind to stay aligned with truth, even when emotions pull, even when pressure builds. So I invite you now, not just to listen, but to apply. Each day gives you chances to pause, to reflect, to reframe. Don't let those chances pass. Start simple. Notice your judgments. Question your assumptions. Replace reactivity with reason. Over time, these practices will shape your emotional stability, your resilience, and your inner strength. If any part of this resonated with you, share it in the comments. What part of your thinking are you working to rewire? What has helped you ground yourself when life tests you? Your story might be the reminder someone else needs. And remember, emotional discipline isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in daily repetition. Educate your mind a little more each day, because when your mind is trained, no circumstance can control you. That's how you rise, not loudly but quietly, not instantly but permanently.